Welcome to Creating Yourself podcast. I'm your host, Paige. This is an inspirational podcast where guests come on and share their real life stories. They discuss their struggles, hardships, and traumas. They also discuss how those encounters have helped them change, grow, and the healing process they've experienced. They share where they are today in hopes of helping someone else who could be going through the same or similar situations. So join me as we inspire others weekly to become the best versions of themselves. Hey y'all, welcome into another episode of Creating Yourself podcast with me, your host Paige. Today I'm excited to have on Jolene. She is the host of Motherhood Off the Rails podcast, and she's going to be talking to us today. Hey Jolene, how are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me, Paige.
Yeah, I'm excited. So I'll just let you get started and we'll go from there.
Yeah, great. Well, again, thank you so much for having me. I think I enjoy, the more I do podcasting, I enjoy being on the guest side more because it's a lot less work.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah. So I'm very excited to be here today because I love telling my story. It's an amazing one. So yes, my name is Jolene. I have been married to my husband for about 5.5 years now. We have a 3.5-year-old boy and a little girl who will be 9 months this month. So my hands are very, very full. I'm a full-time stay-at-home mom, which I love. I was a teacher before I stayed home with my kids, so that's kind of my background. But I guess this whole reason I'm here started in January of 2023 when my husband and I decided that we wanted to add one more to our family. Our son was 1.5 years, and it was just kind of the perfect time. And so, surprisingly, we had no trouble getting pregnant, quick and easy. And I remember taking a pregnancy test on January 9th, 2023, and we were both shocked. It was super excited. And it was a really fun week. My husband and I went out and had a date night and celebrated. I got super comfy maternity pants. Like, I jumped full in because it was my pregnancy with my son. It was easy. I wasn't expecting anything. And then I had a miscarriage on January 16th. And I guess that's where it all began.
Yeah. Yeah. I have 2 boys, so I can feel the boy side of life. Mine are older now. Mine are 14 and 16. So, I'm a little bit out there from that, but yeah, I can feel the boy side of life. It's crazy. It's chaotic. It is. So mine are 5 years apart. So mine aren't quite as close in age as yours are, but they're still pretty close.
Yeah. Mine are just 2 weeks shy of being 3 years apart, and it's adorable right now. I know that it's going to shift and change, but right now, my oldest, he adores his baby sister, and it's just, it's the most precious thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It'll eventually turn into a shit show one day. Yeah. Yeah. So what happened from there? You had to miscarriage. So tell us about that experience.
So previous to this, I had never experienced any type of really earth-shattering loss. I had lost 2 grandparents, but they were older. It was kind of expected. Right. In a way, it was almost relief because we knew they weren't in pain anymore. And so when I had this miscarriage, it completely rocked my world. My best friend had, at that point, 2 miscarriages before. And so she was the first person I texted. And I was like, hey, I think this is what's going on. And so she talked me through. And it's all kind of a blur. I guess you could say, fortunately, I didn't have to go into the ER. I've recorded so many stories where women have had a miscarriage and it has just gone wrong. And they've had to go in for a D&C and everything. And they've been stuck in the ER for hours. So I'm very thankful that when I passed the baby around like 5 or 6 weeks, I was able to stay home. And my husband just held me and we grieved together. But those of us that have children know you've just kind of got to pick yourself back up. Your kid doesn't understand that you're grieving. Your kid doesn't, your 1.5-year-old doesn't understand what happened. So I remember even the day that it was happening, like I was like, I told my husband, I was like, "You've got to get out of the house." Because I couldn't just wallow in bed. That's not, like, it wasn't helping me. So I remember we went to, like, our favorite coffee shop and took ourselves to the library. But then life just kind of went back to normal. And at the same time, though, I knew there was, like, this nagging in my mind that, like, I had to do something with this grief. I couldn't just let it lay low. And so, I started going to therapy a few months later, coincidentally, for something completely unrelated. And through the course of therapy, obviously my miscarriage came up, and, she really, really helped me work through that grief. But so as I was working through that, as I was meeting with friends, and as I was hearing more stories of women that had also had miscarriages and had infant loss. I mean, I knew so many that had had terrible losses in their motherhood journey. And so one day, because journaling is a huge part of my process and just what I've been doing since I was very, very young, I started writing the names of women that I knew personally, either from my university undergrad time, friends here locally where I live. I just started writing names of women who I knew had suffered loss. And I came up with a list of 30 women that
Oh,
I knew
wow.
personally that had gone through loss. And I just kind of looked at this list. I was like, something has to be done, because I knew these women had shared maybe a little bit of their story on social media, or maybe they had shared it with me, but I knew it wasn't out in the open on an open platform. And so I didn't really share the idea of a podcast with anybody too early. I think I shared it with my husband and my best friend, but it kind of just like sat on the back burner for a while. Um, and then one evening I met with a group of women. Um, some of us knew each other, but it was just like a random collection of like 5 or 6 of us that got together that were moms. Um, and I hadn't really shared with anybody about my miscarriage outside of my husband and my best friend. And that night I was just like, you know what? I think it's time for me to get my story out in the open. And I shared it. With tears streaming down my face. It was the first time I'd ever shared it
Right.
openly. And come to find out, every single woman in that group had either suffered a miscarriage, had to do IUI, IVF, had go through postpartum depression, anxiety, the whole lot, every single one of them. And it was just this giant light bulb. It was like, okay, I've got to start this podcast. So obviously I did a bunch of research, and my husband got me this microphone for our anniversary because he, from the very beginning, believed in this. He's like,
Yeah.
I don't know how to do it, but I'll watch the kids while you record. So he has been the number one supporter from the beginning, which I'm so very thankful for. So yeah, I recorded my story along with my best friends back in July of 2023, and I've been recording ever since. We are about halfway through our 5th season, and the 6th season will start about mid-March. And let's see, that'll be about 50 something stories of women that have walked through loss that none of them would have ever imagined, but they've come out on the other end, like myself, stronger, better, more resilient. And so none of us would obviously say that we are grateful for that loss that happened, but we are grateful
Right.
for the people who we have become afterwards. So, and then all of that has led me to now pursue my master's and go back to school to be a marriage and family therapist. So that's kind of like the capstone and the end of my story for now. And it all came out of the greatest loss of my entire life. But I took that, and I'm just a living example of what can happen if you don't let your grief hold you back. And if you, like you said, create something beautiful out of it. So
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah, and I think it's weird. Like, I think a lot of podcasts like yours and mine really start from something like that. I know mine started, I have been through domestic violence, and mine started with me kind of sharing my story with friends and family. And then, it started like, oh, I'm going to slowly start to share my story on TikTok and kind of like put just like my toe in the water and see what happens. And then it was like, people started commenting, like, I've been through the same thing. And I was like, okay, I'll share a little bit more of my story. And slowly it kind of snowballed into this thing. And then I was like, I wanted to start a podcast for a long time, but I didn't really know where I wanted to go or how I wanted to, what I wanted my niche to be, you know? Me and a friend had started talking about, well, let's do one with like dating and relationships and stuff like that. And that kind of fizzled out, and her and I aren't friends anymore. So that didn't work out. And then when I realized that so many people have, everybody has a story. Everybody has something they've been through. They have some sort of, nowadays, sadly, everybody has some sort of trauma or hardship or struggle that they've been through. And I was like, I want to be able to like share people's stories and, you know, make people realize that no matter what they're going through, whether it be abuse, addiction, assault, you know, losing a child in, you know, in the way that you've lost a child, or losing an adult child, even, you know, any way, shape, or form, that they're not alone in what they've gone through, and that there's other people out there that they can reach out to. Any sort of grief, you know, there's always someone out there who's been through the same thing that they've been through, or something very similar to that. And so, again, I started with sharing my story. I reached out to a couple of friends and I was like, hey, would you want to come on and kind of help me start this podcast? And so I had a couple of friends come on, share their story. And then I just slowly started reaching out to people on like Instagram and TikTok. And like, I would see them already sharing their story. So I was like, what's it going to hurt to ask them to share it on a podcast if they're already sharing it on social media? And I found so many amazing people through doing this that I still am friends with to this day. Like, I still talk to them on a daily basis, or weekly or monthly. You know, it may not be daily, but I still talk to them and we still connect. And it's like, hey, they were on my first season, which was back in 2023, and we're in 2025. And I'm like, how's your day? How's life? Like, what's going on? And we're still friends. And it's really cool to like meet people that I would have never met doing this process.
Yeah, that is something that I don't think I expected. My favorite connection that I've made is a woman who I had a few seasons ago. And we were messaging back and forth to, you know, like confirm our time to meet up and to record. And she was like, hey, I don't think so. I don't think I can on this day. I'm going through a lot of anxiety because I'm 11 weeks pregnant. And I was also 11 weeks pregnant at that same exact time and hadn't told anybody. And so our babies ended up being just like a week apart, our rainbow babies. And so I think, and we still, like, we're friends on our personal social medias now. And, you know, we see pictures of our kids all the time. And so we have this connection. We will always be centered around our loss. And there's something about friendships that were created out of loss that are sometimes, I wouldn't say deeper, but it's just a completely different connection than friends from high school or childhood friends or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I agree. I have one girl that we don't talk very often, but we're friends on Facebook, our personal Facebooks. And she reconnected me. I had a guy that I've been friends with since high school, and he's been in and out of addiction. We've been friends on and off for years. And he's been in and out of jail, in and out of prison. And I finally cut him off a couple of years ago and was like, I'm just done. I can't do this anymore. I've never done drugs a day in my life. I've never lived that lifestyle. And I told him I was finally just to the point where, like, I can't have you in my life until you get your life straight. I just can't do it anymore. Like, I love you to death, but like, it's just to the point where I can't see you struggle anymore, because I know you're better than this. Like, I know your heart, and I know that like I know you deserve better, and until you can see that you deserve better, I can't have you in my life.
Yeah.
And when she was on my podcast, she just explained addiction and recovery and the way that people go through it in such a way that it had never been explained to me before. And it felt different, and it made me actually reach out to him and be like, I'm going to give you this opportunity. And if you break it, or you do something that makes me distrust you again, that's it. Like, we're done for life. And he's still in prison, but he's doing so much better. And I've actually went and visited him once since then, about a couple months ago. And it just has made me see that he's willing. Like, this time is different. Something about this time is totally different. Yeah. And I'm like forever thankful for that connection, and that her coming on and just explaining addiction and recovery in a totally different way that I don't think I would have ever seen the light per se had she not come on and explained it.
Yeah, I have learned so much from every single woman that has come on. But I think the overarching character trait, I guess you could say, that I didn't think I would gain from this is empathy.
Same.
I was raised in an environment where you judged people by where they went to church or what they wore or what they said or what they did for work or where they went to school, like immediate judgment just on the outside. And it's something that I knew I needed to change, and something I didn't want to pass on to my kids. I wanted them to see people for who they truly were. And hearing every single one of these stories has given me an insight into the stories that random strangers on the street that I pass might have.
Yep.
And it makes me more curious, and it helps me be less judgmental. Like if they're parenting their kids a certain way that might be different than mine, maybe they're doing that because of a loss and because their life is completely upended. And so I get that you see people completely differently. The world is completely changed in the best way possible after hearing so many stories and seeing yourself changed along with helping share all these stories.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you literally took the words right out of my mouth. Like I couldn't have said it any better. It's empathy is one thing empathy and sympathy is something that I've gained from doing this that I never thought that it just like it changed me, and I was like, what is happening? Like this is not something I expected to change from doing this. You know what I mean? Like it's so weird to like sit back and realize that like the world is such a complex place that I never really realized until I started talking to people and realizing there's a lot of really bad shit out in the world that I didn't like. I knew it was there, but I didn't really realize like how bad it really was until I've sat down and talked to people and like listened to their life stories. And I'm like, wow, like, okay, like people really have to sit down and go through this stuff on like a daily basis. So it's really opened my eyes a lot.
Yeah. And it makes you grateful for the little things that you do have. And I'm more grateful for my children than I ever was before my loss, because I know what it is like to get a positive pregnancy test and a week later, it's just gone. And there's very little answers. I mean, we could go into how the scientific world is not researching women's bodies the way they were, but that's another podcast for another time, because I don't have concrete answers of why I had my loss. But all I do know is that I can take, that grief and I can channel it into loving my kids, because they are here, they're in front of me, they are healthy, they are happy, and they are wonderful. I'm glad they're taking naps right now because I get a break, but I love them, and I love them deeper than I think I ever could have if I hadn't have experienced loss.
Yeah. So when you had your loss, how did your family react to that?
Yeah. And this is actually one of the questions that I ask on my own podcast, like how your loss affected your relationships. Let's see, let me back up. So I knew I had to go in for a doctor's appointment, shortly after my loss, just to confirm that my numbers were going back down and everything was going back to normal. And I couldn't get anybody to watch my son. We have a pretty decent community here, but just that one day, like I just couldn't get anybody. And so I texted my mom. I was like, hey, they live like an hour and a half away. I was like, hey, I know this is a little bit inconvenient, but I have a doctor's appointment and I can't bring our son with me. Can you come down? She's like, yeah, sure. Like grandma's going to take any excuse she can to come watch the grandkids. And so she came down, and she hadn't been in the house for like 5 minutes when she could just tell something was wrong. And I just broke down and I told her, and she's like, I had a feeling. Like as moms, we know we have that. I was going to say,
moms always know.
Yes. And she just knew. And so she hasn't experienced a miscarriage per se, but she did have to deliver my baby sister, 7 weeks early, I believe. And she was in the NICU for 9 weeks. So she has experienced a little bit of loss in that way. But still, she knew just what to say. All she did was give me a hug. She didn't really know what else to say, but she was there and she took care of my son. So in that way, it was strengthened. My sister-in-law actually had a miscarriage while I was pregnant with our first. And our babies would have been only like a few weeks apart. And so in that way, my sister-in-law and my friendship and relationship has deepened, and we are closer than we ever were. I mean, my brother dated her for years, so I've known her for a long time, but that our shared miscarriages took our friendship and our family bond to the next level. I mean, then with my husband, I mean, I loved him since the day I met him. I just knew I was going to marry him. But seeing him be there for me and support me, and then when we were able to like talk about it and grieve together, he was actually a guest on my podcast too, and shared like the male perspective and shared his side of the grief and loss. And I think our connection is stronger than ever. Especially when I was pregnant with our rainbow baby girl. It was the most anxious I've ever been in my entire life. I'm not an anxious, usually worried person, but it was the most anxious I'd ever been. And on those tough days, he knew, to maybe just take our son and take him somewhere so I could have time alone, or, he bent over backwards to make sure that I made it through. And he obviously is the most amazing father to our kids. And so I think my husband and I have become stronger than we were ever before. So yeah, definitely made connection stronger. I was fortunate to not lose family or friends over my loss, because I know too many women that whatever they have walked through have lost relationships because the people didn't know how to be empathetic, didn't know or said the wrong things and got offended when they were corrected, because as society, we have these platitudes of, oh, it happened for a reason. Oh, well, at least you can get pregnant. Like, there's so many. And so we can't blame society, because people don't know how to relate to the loss of a life that maybe didn't even have a heartbeat, or to a child that was delivered 21 weeks and wouldn't make it. We don't know how to deal with that grief. We're not comfortable with it. And so too many women have lost friendships and have lost relationships with family members because that family just wasn't willing to be like, hey, I don't know what to say, but I'm going to sit here with you in your discomfort and be there for you. So I'm very fortunate for the family relationships that were made stronger.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say and I feel like a lot of husbands too, or boyfriends or whatever in that situation are don't know how to handle it. So
Exactly.
I think him coming on your podcast was a really good idea, and to show people, that there are healthy ways to handle it, because a lot of men do not know how to handle it at all.
It's obviously my favorite episode, but yeah, I was so proud of him. Like, it wasn't like anything earth shattering. We just had a microphone in between us, and we just were having a conversation like we normally do, following a little bit of a script. But no, I was so thankful that he did that. And if I was going to continue to record, I would hope that I could have more husband and wife pairs to come on to share the male perspective, because like you said, society convinces men that they need to be strong and they can't show their feelings, and patriarchy and all this crap. But so much of the time, we can all agree we are attracted to a man that isn't just macho all the time, but that shows that he does have emotions, because they do. They just have been taught from a very young age that it's not what they should be showing. And so, yeah, if I can make, and I'm hoping that with my future career of being a marriage and family therapist, I will be able to reach out to those husbands and boyfriends and fathers who have gone through loss and be like, hey, this is how you can express your grief. It's okay to do so. Let's work through this together. So I'm really excited about that next chapter in my life, and all the potential that it has, because fortunately or unfortunately, I'm going to have a job for the rest of my life because therapy is not going anywhere and people are only needing it more.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's definitely job security for sure. Yeah. I think it's incredible. I've had quite a few men come on my podcast and talk about, things. I've had one come on and talk about his addiction. I've had one come on and talk about, he was suicidal at one point. And he had just got out of a marriage, and he was suicidal and had to talk about, his staying around for his kids and things like that. He's one of my friends. He came on and just kind of told his life story. And I was like really proud of him for that because he's not one to really talk about his feelings at all. So I was really excited that he came on and just kind of shared his life story in general because it's hard to get men to talk about their feelings at all.
Yeah. Us women have no problem at all. We could jabber all day.
I mean, we'll sit down and talk about it for hours. We don't care. That's what we do. But yeah, I love that you were able to get that on. And I think having couples come on and talk even would be really cool to hear about. I think that would be a really cool thing.
Yeah. I mean, I wish that I had a million assistants and I could have someone just run my podcast because we still have a wait list of 50-something women that said, yeah, I want to share my story. I just haven't been able to get around to recording their story or meeting with them. But I think at this time, it's just time for me to shift my focus to the therapy world. And so I can't be a mom and a podcaster and a therapist all at the same time. So something's got to give.
Yeah, it's hard for sure.
But eventually, I mean, I would love to just, randomly put out some episodes when I can. So it's definitely not the end. It's just a different focus. I'll be learning how to actually be paid for talking to people and therapizing them.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Listen, send a couple my way. We can have them over here sharing their stories.
There you go.
For sure. I'm all about it. But yeah, I think it's great. And I'm all about listening to people's stories all day long. I could sit and do this for hours. Yes. I love listening to people's stories.
Yeah. Me too. I'm definitely a little bit nosy enough. I think that has a lot to do with it. I want to hear people's reasons for why they are the way they are, and our stories are so much a part of that.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm a huge true crime fanatic too. Because I'm like, why did they do what they did?
Oh my goodness! I just finished a Lisa Jewell book. I don't know if you've heard of her. But she does some, it was a psychological thriller and it was so good. And I'm just like, okay, I need to know what happened in this woman's life to make her do the thing she did.
Yeah. I think some of those are my favorite, the psychological thrillers. I love those because I'm like, what? Why did it was going this way and then it took a full 180 and went this way. And then I thought we were going this way and then it took another full 180 and went back this way. It's like, wait, what?
Because, my life doesn't have enough drama, so I need to get drama out of my books.
Yeah. I'm not a huge reader. I'm much more of a TV movie watcher, but I still love the psychological thrillers. Those are great. So I'm just on the edge of my seat waiting for something crazy to happen.
Yeah, my husband's an English teacher, and so by default, we are a nerdy book home. So,
gotcha.
That's sometimes our date nights are we go to a coffee shop and we read. We're weird, weird and old like that. So,
love that though. Listen, to each his own. Whatever works. So, what's one of your favorite stories that you've had on? Even though you have kind of more of the sadder, empathetic type stories, what's one of the more favorite stories that you've had on your podcast?
I need to pull them up because I've done so many at this point. Oh my goodness. Okay. So one story that I had back in season 1, she had a miscarriage, around the same time that I did and had a little boy. And then they just found out that they're pregnant with a little girl and they had been trying for a while. And this was just random and spontaneous. So stories that have the happy ending, I'm a sucker for them. The book that I just read didn't necessarily have the happy ending I was wanting. But I'm so thankful when I get stories that have that happy ending. Another one in season 4 was my cousin Rebecca. And I think we're something like 13 years apart. My dad's side of the family is huge. So she's quite a bit older than me and has daughters in college, but she lost a little girl at 6 months.
Oh, wow.
And this was the first time she was ever sharing her story on a podcast. And so I had kind of known the story before, but I had never like sat down with her and heard the story in this setting. And so now we have that connection that's even stronger. So let's see, what are some other ones? I have another friend who went through something called secondary infertility. So her and her husband had no trouble getting pregnant with their first. But it took them the longest time, and they had to go through multiple rounds of IVF to have their second. And her and I ended up being pregnant with our rainbow babies, and they're just 11 weeks apart. And I had her come on while we were both pregnant. We were, excited about that, but we were talking about our pregnancy after loss journeys. So my friend Olivia, shout out, that was so much fun to record that with her now that we were on the other side. Obviously my husband's, he was the season premiere in season 4, getting to just sit down with him. And, we didn't, like I said, we didn't have anything earth shattering, but it was just like, I was so unbelievably proud of him. And so many people were looking forward to hearing, that story too, because I feel like I bring him up in every single one of my, podcast. And then lastly, my friend, she was the third episode in season 1. So way back when, she didn't physically lose any babies, but while she was pregnant with her third, she started having seizures, and it was extremely terrifying. And she's still going through a journey of figuring out what's wrong with her. There's something in her brain that has been there since birth, but they're just now figuring out, and there's, MRIs and everything. And so hers was a little bit different. Like, she lost a part of herself in her health while she was pregnant. And so, so my stories run the gambit of everything. The story that just came out this week, it was a mom, one of my friends, she's actually my neighbor, who didn't physically lose a child, but went through very, very deep and dark, postpartum depression and anxiety. So we've got a little bit of everything. Stories are very, very heavy. And so I always give kind of like a little bit of a trigger warning, like listen to them. Press pause if you need to, bring tissues for sure.
Right.
But so many of them are worth a listen to then go find them on social media and see where their story is and see where their happy or not happy ending is. I have one of the stories who they went through, I think like 5 or 6 rounds of IVF, and I haven't heard from her. And so I don't know if she's pregnant or not. And I don't know if they've had that happy ending. So it's a very tough podcast to run. I'm not going to lie. Like when I was pregnant with my rainbow baby, there's a few episodes I just couldn't listen to because it was going to trigger my anxiety too much. So it's definitely not your casual road trip podcast to listen to. But so many of them do have those happy endings. So choose carefully. There's disclaimers and topics at the beginning of each episode description, so people kind of have a heads up.
Yeah. I have one of my cousins, his wife, when the mother of his kids, she went through with her second. After her second, they never like diagnosed her with anything, as far as I'm aware, but I'm pretty sure after researching and doing a lot of reading on postpartum psychosis, I'm pretty sure that she was suffering from postpartum psychosis because she went through the whole thing of like wanting to put the kids in the car and like drive into a brick wall and do all kinds of like harming the kids and all kinds of, really awful things. And I kept trying to tell my mom and my aunt, I was like, listen, I'm pretty sure that she's suffering, like, not only from postpartum depression, but I'm pretty sure that she is suffering from postpartum psychosis because it was not only, like, wanting to hurt herself, but, like, wanting to put the kids in the car and do things to the kids. And she would just go into, like, this trance of, like, almost, like she was like a zombie. Like, and you would, like, try to talk to her, and you were like, hello, and she would just, like, stare at you, and you were like, what is happening? And so she went through that for a while. She was in and out of like hospitals, and I don't think they really understood like what was going on, because as far as I know, they never diagnosed her with anything. And then after seeing the woman that was all over the news, that like through, like, I think she hurt the 3 kids and then jumped out of the window.
Yeah, I haven't heard of it.
I don't remember where it was at, but like her husband like left to go to the doctor, or like down the street to get, I think he went to like go rent a movie or something down the street. I don't remember. But and he came back and like all 3 of the kids were, I don't think she actually killed them. She tried to. I don't remember. And then she like jumped out a 3rd-story window of their house or something like that. And I was like, and they started talking about postpartum psychosis. I started doing like research on it. And I was like, I'm almost positive that this is what she was suffering from, just based off of what she had tried to do. And it was really scary for a long time, because I was like, she can't, like, they wouldn't allow her to be at home alone with the kids. Like the doctors would say, you know, if we catch her at home, or if you tell us she's at home alone with the kids, like, you're going to be arrested. She's going to be arrested. Like, it was a whole thing. So I was like, it was really awful for a long time.
And it all boils down to the fact that there's just not enough work done on postpartum women. Like, you go to your 6-week appointment, check, you're good, you can have sex now. Like, we need more than that. And that's a huge reason why I'm going into the therapy field, because eventually my big dream is to have a practice that's totally centered around women like your family member who was undiagnosed, but clearly there was something wrong, and she maybe, I'm not saying like for sure, but maybe just talking to a therapist that knew about all these mental disorders and knew the science behind a postpartum woman's body, maybe it would have helped. Like, you just never know. So I just, like, I want to do my part in this grand scheme of things to help women find themselves again after, you know, like, having a kid is no joke. Like, your body is completely changed forever. And the society just views it as very lightly. Oh, woman had a baby, she can get back to work at 6 weeks, you're good. Like, there's so much more to it. So it's just a little soapbox that I stand on every so often.
It is. It's, I think, a woman, like, I mean, we literally have carried a life for 9 months and, you know, pushed them out and all the things. And like, it's a traumatic, like, our body literally goes through trauma. When having a child. And I don't think a lot of people realize that.
Nope, definitely not.
So, well, was there anything else that you wanted to talk about today?
I don't think so. I think that kind of covers my story and everything that I'm very passionate about.
Yeah. Well, listen, I've appreciated you coming on and sharing your story with my guests, or with my audience today. So
yeah, I definitely appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, of course. Thank you all so much for tuning in to this week's episode. Make sure you hit the follow button on whatever listening platform you are using, and head over to my social media pages and give me a follow there as well. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and now TikTok at Creating Yourself Pod. And if you have a story you would like to share on this podcast, email me at creatingyourselfpod@gmail.com, or you can message me on any of my social media pages. Make sure and come back next Tuesday for a brand new episode. Hope you guys have a great week. Bye.